The day we buried my father-in-law, my jobless husband inherited $180 million. Then he told me I was fired. "You're useless now," he smirked, the expression twisting his handsome features into something ugly. "I don't need you anymore." But after the divorce papers were signed, the lawyer just smiled. "Did you actually read the will?" he asked. My ex-husband's face turned ashen when he finally learned the devastating truth. "Your contribution is no longer required," Julian announced, his words clinical and cold. He dropped the key to our apartment onto the kitchen counter, the clatter of the metal a definitive full stop to our 4 years together. $180 million, Alara. That's what Dad left me." He gestured around our modest Boston apartment, a space I had single-handedly paid for. "You were convenient for covering the rent, but now—" He gave a little shrug, a gesture of performed nonchalance. "You're worthless to me." It had been a mere day and a half since we had laid Arthur Croft to rest, a man whose final, raspy words to me had been a strange promise about justice finding its own path. Now, as Julian paraded around our home, dreaming aloud of his new life as a tycoon, I felt the sharp edge of the lawyer's business card in my coat pocket. It had arrived with a hushed, urgent voicemail. "Mrs. Croft, your attendance at the will reading is essential. There's a contingency clause your husband is not aware of." Julian pulled a bottle of champagne from the fridge, one I'd purchased for an anniversary he'd completely forgotten. The cork popped with a sound that felt like a gunshot in the suddenly tense quiet of our apartment. He didn't even pretend to offer me a glass, instead taking a long swig directly from the bottle as he browsed real estate in the Cayman Islands on his phone. "I'm thinking beachfront," he mused, his eyes glued to the screen. "Something with its own dock. You can have this place. Think of it as a severance package for your services." Services. That's what 4 years of my life had been reduced to. 4 years of waking up in the dark to commute to my financial analyst job in the financial district, while he slept past noon. 4 years of my savings being siphoned into his bottomless pit of failed business ideas. The craft brewery that never produced a single pint, the subscription box service that never shipped a single box, the consulting firm whose only client was his own reflection. My mind drifted back to the networking event at the Seaport Hotel where we first met. The room was a sea of ambitious young professionals, all armed with practiced smiles and elevator pitches. My boss had pushed me to go, claiming it was crucial for my visibility. I was hovering by the open bar, feeling out of place with my glass of cheap Sauvignon Blanc, when Julian materialized beside me. "You look like someone who actually works for a living," he'd said, flashing a smile that should have come with a warning label. The story he wove for me that night was a masterpiece of manufactured sympathy. His mother had passed away when he was young, his father's health was fragile, and he, the dutiful son, had put a promising career on hold to be the family's rock. In a room full of people posturing about their stock portfolios, his narrative of self-sacrifice was a breath of fresh air. When he found me 3 hours later in the crowd, remembered my name, brought me a fresh drink, and perfectly quoted something I'd said about bond yields, I thought I'd found a man who truly listened. My father built half the commercial properties on the North Shore, he'd told me over coffee the next day. But I learned young that money isn't the real measure of a man. Being there for the people who need you, that's what counts. I was 36 then, still healing from a divorce that had been less of a bang and more of a slow hiss, a gradual deflation of a relationship until nothing was left. My ex and I had just drifted, 2 ships passing in the night. Julian's intense energy, his boundless confidence, his talent for framing unemployment as a strategic pause, it felt like he was painting my monochrome life in vibrant color. Now, watching him plot his escape funded by his father's legacy, I was struck by the memory of my first meeting with Arthur. Julian had finally invited me to his father's home in Cambridge about 6 months into our relationship. The condo was not the opulent mansion I had pictured from Julian's stories. It was comfortable, but unassuming, its walls lined with bookshelves, its air filled with the quiet scent of old paper and wisdom, not wealth. Arthur had been 79, but his mind was as sharp as a man half his age. Within 5 minutes, he was asking me pointed questions about my work. A financial analyst, he'd said, peering over his spectacles. Interesting. What's your assessment of the current geopolitical impact on emerging markets? For the next 2 hours, we dove deep into economic theory, while Julian fidgeted between us, checking his phone and occasionally interjecting with corporate buzzwords like synergy and disruption that had no bearing on our conversation. At one point, while Julian was in the kitchen, Arthur leaned in close. "My son," he'd said in a low voice. "He needs an anchor. Someone who grasps that money without wisdom is just a fast track to ruin. I hope you can be that person for him. But more importantly, I hope you remember to protect yourself." The warning was right there, veiled in paternal concern. I'd chosen to hear only the part about hope. A year later, Arthur had insisted on funding our small City Hall wedding. Julian had wanted a grand affair, a stage to impress his so-called potential investors. Arthur had put his foot down. A marriage is a covenant, not a capital venture, he'd stated, leaving Julian to sulk for a week. During the simple reception, as Julian delivered a toast that sounded suspiciously like a pitch for a new startup, Arthur quietly slipped an envelope into my hand. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a simple note, "For the inevitable rainy days." My mother, who had flown in from Ohio, watched the whole scene with a furrowed brow. "Are you absolutely sure about him?" she'd whispered to me. I had been sure then. I had been so very wrong. "Are you just going to stand there?" Julian's voice yanked me back to the present. He'd polished off half the champagne and was now culling his wardrobe, carelessly tossing suits he deemed unworthy of his new station onto a pile on our bed. "Alistair Finch says the estate will clear probate by tomorrow. I'll have the divorce papers sent over then. Alistair Finch, Arthur's lawyer, the name on the business card that felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. The same Alistair Finch who had left that cryptic voicemail just hours after the funeral. Mrs. Croft, it is imperative you attend the will reading. There are elements of Arthur's estate that directly require your presence. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." Julian had made no mention of any formal reading. According to him, the inheritance was a simple, direct transfer to him as the sole heir. But Arthur Croft was many things. Kind, brilliant, endlessly patient with his deeply disappointing son. But simple was not one of them. "I'm heading to the Four Seasons for the night," Julian declared, zipping up a suitcase I'd bought him for his birthday 2 years prior. "I can't spend another minute in this dump. This dump." The apartment I had paid for every single month for 4 years. The place Arthur had visited every single Sunday until he became too ill. Always bringing a bag of groceries he'd overbought, always slipping a $100 bill into my purse when Julian wasn't looking, always staying for coffee and genuine conversation after his son invariably made an excuse to go network at a nearby sports bar. As Julian wheeled his suitcase to the door, he paused. "Oh, and Alara? Don't even think about contesting anything. Dad told me ages ago I was his only beneficiary. $180 million. It's all mine." The door clicked shut behind him, and the apartment, which had felt so suffocating moments before, suddenly felt spacious and quiet. I took a deep breath, the first clean one all day, and pulled out my phone and Alistair Finch's card. Whatever plan Arthur had set in motion, whatever justice he had whispered about in his final moments, it was time to find out. The phone rang only once, before a calm, steady voice answered, as if he'd been waiting for my call. "Mrs. Croft," Alistair said, his voice imbued with a gravity I couldn't quite decipher. "We need to discuss Arthur's will. Can you be at my office tomorrow morning at 10? And please, come by yourself. Do not mention this call to Julian." I hung up after confirming the meeting with Alistair Finch, a slight tremor in my hands. The apartment, now empty of Julian's manic energy, felt like a space where I could finally think clearly. I walked into the bedroom and began methodically hanging up the clothes he'd discarded in his rush to escape his old life. I needed a simple, mechanical task to occupy my hands while my mind reeled. It was a familiar ritual. 6 months into our marriage, I'd done the exact same thing after one of his dramatic walkouts, that time over the failed craft brewery. He'd spent weeks on it, not brewing beer, but creating intricate spreadsheets with color-coded profit projections and designing logos for a brand that existed only on his laptop. The permits had cost $4,000. The lease on a small industrial space, another $7,000. The specialized brewing equipment he'd bought on credit, a staggering $15,000. All of it was financed by my salary and a personal loan I'd taken out, convinced I was investing in our shared future. The day he finally admitted the brewing license was denied, he'd actually blamed the city of Boston. This city's bureaucracy is designed to crush the little guy, he'd raged, pacing the living room as I stared at the overdue notice for the storage unit holding the equipment. When I gently suggested that his total lack of brewing experience might have been a factor, he had looked at me with such profound theatrical hurt. "I thought you believed in me," he'd whispered, and somehow I was the one who ended up apologizing, consoling him over the $26,000 failure that was entirely his fault. That was the weekend Arthur started his Sunday visits. He appeared at our door with bags of groceries, claiming his eyes were bigger than his stomach at the market. Julian, already immersed in research for his next game-changing venture, an app to disrupt the pet-sitting industry, barely acknowledged him. "Let me give you a hand," Arthur had said to me. As we put away milk and bread I hadn't asked for but desperately needed, he slipped an envelope into my purse. Inside, I found $500 in cash and a note. For the pantry. Not a word. Those Sundays became my lifeline. Arthur would arrive at 10 a.m. sharp, always with food, always with a plausible excuse. Julian would endure his father's company for a polite 30 minutes before announcing a pressing meeting with potential investors, which we both knew was code for watching the Patriots game at the bar down the street. As soon as Julian was gone, Arthur would brew real coffee, not the instant powder I'd switched to for budget reasons, and we would talk. He taught me about index funds, the nuances of estate planning, and the quiet power of compound interest. "You have a true gift for numbers, Alara," he told me once. It's a gift, I'm afraid, that Julian did not inherit. It was during one of those Sunday talks about a year into the marriage that I stumbled upon the credit card statements. I was searching for a stamp in Julian's briefcase, the expensive leather one he carried to imaginary meetings, when a sheaf of folded papers fell out. 3 months of statements for a card in his name I never knew existed. The charges made my blood run cold. $1,000 at a high-end steakhouse for a business dinner on a night he told me he was at a tech meetup. $2,000 on custom-tailored suits from a boutique on Newbury Street, shoes that cost more than our monthly rent. In the margins, he'd neatly written business expense next to each charge, as if the label magically made it true. I confronted him that night, the papers laid out on our bed like exhibits in a prosecution. He barely glanced at them. "You don't understand the cost of doing business, Alara," he'd said, adjusting the collar of one of the new shirts I now recognized. "This isn't spending, it's investing in my image. You have to look the part to get the funding." "Jeff Bezos famously wears jeans and a fleece vest," I shot back, my voice shaking with anger. For a second, his composure faltered. "That's because he already made it. I'm on the way up, and if you're not going to support my climb, then maybe you're the one holding me back." The ensuing argument was the worst we'd ever had. Julian stormed out, and I sat on the cold bathroom floor crying silently until I heard the familiar sounds of his video game starting up in the living room. He hadn't even left the apartment. The following Sunday, Arthur found me red-eyed and exhausted. I finally broke down and told him everything: the secret credit card, the lies, the mounting debt. He listened patiently, his face a mask of sorrow. "How much?" he asked quietly when I was done. "I don't know," I confessed. "Maybe 30,000, maybe more." He wrote me a check for $10,000 on the spot, insisting it was an early birthday gift, though my birthday was months away. Then he sat down, looking all of his 80 years. His mother left when he was 16, Arthur said, staring into his coffee cup. She said she couldn't take the constant, pointless lies. I thought it was just a phase. I thought he'd grow out of it. He paused, wrestling with a lifetime of guilt. I blame myself. After she was gone, I threw money at him. I thought I was showing him love, but I was just teaching him that someone would always be there to clean up his mess. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. I won't tell you to leave him, Alara, but I need you to know that I'll understand if you do, and if you choose to stay. We look out for each other. Agreed? That was our pact. Arthur would help me financially, and I would shield him from the full, humiliating scope of his son's failures. We became a silent partnership, united by our shared disappointment. But I knew Arthur saw it all. In his quiet, methodical way, he was documenting the lies, observing the patterns, and waiting. About 18 months into our silent pact, Arthur had a fall. The doctor at Mass General said it was vertigo, complicated by dehydration. Nothing life-threatening, but a clear sign that at his age, living alone was becoming a risk. I called Julian, who was at a golf tournament, and he arrived 3 hours later, launching into the performance of a lifetime. He wept. He held his father's hand, and he announced to the entire nursing staff that he was putting his career on hold to become Arthur's full-time caregiver. "It's my turn to take care of you, Dad," he declared. Arthur just looked at me over Julian's head, his expression one of weary resignation. A week later, I came home early and saw a woman in medical scrubs leaving our building. A quick search of Julian's emails that night revealed the truth. He had hired a 24/7 home care agency, billing it directly to Arthur's accounts, while telling his father he was doing it all himself. The bills were astronomical, nearly $5,000 a week. Meanwhile, Julian's spending accelerated. A new Breitling watch appeared on his wrist, a gift from a grateful contact he'd claimed. When I questioned him, he just shrugged. "Dad won't be around forever. Think of it as an advance on our future." Our future. As if I hadn't seen the browser history filled with searches for Miami condos, as if I hadn't accidentally seen the texts to an old flame about being single again soon. He was already planning his life after me, using money that wasn't even his yet. The last time I saw Arthur lucid, everything crystallized. Julian had stepped out to take yet another important call. Arthur's grip on my hand was surprisingly firm. "Alara," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "Promise me." The will reading. "You must be there, no matter what he says." I promised. "Alistair Finch has all my instructions," he continued, his eyes sharp and clear for a moment. "I know about the nurse. I've known all along." He fumbled for a small leather journal on his nightstand. "Keep this," he urged, pressing it into my hand. "Write down what really happens. The truth deserves a witness." Julian returned then, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Dad looks tired," he said, glancing at his new watch. "We should let him rest." 3 days later, Arthur passed away in his sleep. I was the one who got the call. I was the one who sat with his body, waiting for the funeral home. Julian was at a bar, celebrating a deal that never existed. The funeral was a rushed, impersonal affair at a chapel Julian chose for its all-inclusive package. He read a generic eulogy from his phone, praising Arthur as a titan of business who taught him everything he knew. A statement that was, in its own way, true, since Arthur had taught him nothing, and he knew nothing. At the reception, Arthur's old friends, a group of kind elderly book club members, surrounded me, offering genuine condolences while actively avoiding Julian. One of them, a woman named Mrs. Gable, pulled me aside. "Arthur was so worried about you," she whispered. "He made us all promise we'd check in on you. After what?" I wondered. She just squeezed my hand and moved away as Julian approached, beaming. "Great turnout," he said. though barely 20 people had come. That evening, back at our apartment, he opened the expensive champagne. The next morning, he presented me with the divorce papers. "I don't need your meager salary anymore," he said, pushing them across the table. The words, which should have shattered me, instead brought a strange sense of calm. I felt Arthur's presence, his quiet voice in my memory. Wisdom matters more than wealth. I signed the papers. "Fine," I said, my voice steady, "but we do this through our lawyers." "Whatever you want," he laughed, already mentally on a yacht. "Alistair can handle it all. A clean break." I checked into a hotel near the airport, a neutral space to collect myself. My phone lit up with a barrage of texts from Julian, a predictable cycle of demand, anger, feigned concern, and finally threats. I ignored them all. That evening, I found the journal Arthur had given me. Tucked inside was an envelope with my name on it. It was a letter, written a month before he died. "My dear Alara." It began, "If you are reading this, then my son has behaved exactly as I feared. I owe you an apology. I hoped you could change him, but instead he only saw your goodness as another resource to exploit. I have made provisions in my will. Julian has never read it. He simply assumes everything will be his. Trust Alistair. Attend the reading. Justice has a way of arriving in unexpected packages." The final lines brought tears to my eyes. "You deserved a better hand than you were dealt. My son's marriage to you was the only wise decision he ever made, though he will never understand it. Be strong. Some people cannot be saved, only survived." The morning of the meeting was cold and gray. I dressed in a professional charcoal blazer and black slacks, the armor of a woman with nothing left to prove. Julian was already in the waiting room of Alistair Finch's law firm, sprawled in a leather chair, checking a gaudy new watch on his wrist. He didn't look up as I entered. Alistair's office was on a high floor with a panoramic view of the Boston Harbor. He was a silver-haired man whose quiet dignity made Julian's flashy suit look like a costume. "Before we begin," Alistair said, his voice calm, "I must confirm. Julian, you initiated divorce proceedings 3 days ago, is that correct?" Yes, signed and filed," Julian said impatiently. "Now about the $180 million. Alistair slid a thick leather-bound document across the massive mahogany desk. "Julian," he said, his tone dropping slightly, "have you ever actually read your father's will?" Julian's confidence faltered. Dad told me years ago I was the sole beneficiary. I asked if you've read the document," Alistair repeated. I watched as Julian opened the will. I saw his eyes scan the first page, his brow furrowing slightly. Then he turned to the second page. His face went from confusion to disbelief, and then to a ghastly shade of pale. His hands began to shake. "This can't be right," he whispered. "A mistake." "There is no mistake," Alistair said evenly. "Your father's full inheritance of $180 million was contingent upon your remaining legally married to Alara for a period of no less than 1 year following his death. He believed, and I quote, Julian requires Alara's wisdom and stability to manage such wealth responsibly." Julian turned to me, his eyes wide with panic. "Alara, we can fix this. We can withdraw the papers. Tell him we've reconciled." Alistair continued as if Julian hadn't spoken. "As per the will's terms, in the event of divorce proceedings being initiated by you within that 1-year period, the entirety of the estate, minus a small personal stipend, is to be transferred to the Arthur Croft Foundation for Financial Literacy." "How small?" Julian croaked. $50,000, Alistair replied. "Your father felt this was, and I quote, sufficient for Julian to start over and learn the value of honest work." The silence in the room was absolute. Julian stared at the papers, his face a mask of horror. He tried bargaining, pleading with me. "We can split it. $90 million each." He tried threats. "I'll contest. This is undue influence. You poisoned him against me." Finally, He tried tears, real tears, but they were useless now. I stood up, smoothing my slacks. "You spent 4 years living off my salary," I said, my voice as cold as the harbor below. "You lied to your dying father. You threw me away the second you thought you didn't need me. Your father knew exactly who you were, Julian. This wasn't a punishment. It was his final lesson." I turned to Alistair. "Please proceed with the divorce as filed. I believe Arthur would be happy to know his legacy will be used to teach the very thing his son never learned." "Wait," Alistair said, a faint smile on his lips. "There is one more provision." He handed me a small envelope. "Arthur left a personal bequest for you. Inside was a check for $25,000 and a note. For the fresh start you so richly deserve, go build the life he could never give you." Julian crumpled. "I have nothing," he whimpered. "No job, no savings. How am I supposed to live?" "The same way the rest of us do," I said, turning to leave. "You work." At the door, I heard his voice, broken and small. "Ilara, please. We could have had everything." I paused, but didn't look back. "No, Julian. You could have had everything. All you had to do was value what you already had." A week later, the divorce was final. The money was transferred to the foundation, which began setting up financial literacy workshops in community centers across the city, many in buildings Arthur himself had developed. 6 months later, I was volunteering at one of those workshops, teaching basic budgeting to a group of eager single mothers. I felt more fulfilled than I had in years. As for Julian, I heard he eventually got a job at a call center, selling extended car warranties. To access his $50,000 stipend, he had to prove 6 months of continuous employment. For the first time in his life, he had no one to bail him out. He had to work. It wasn't a fortune, but as Arthur always said, it was a start. If this story of a meticulously planned final lesson had you cheering for justice, go ahead and hit that like button. My favorite part was when Alistair slid the will across that desk, knowing the world was about to shift under Julian's feet. What was your favorite moment of karma? Let me know in the comments below, and for more tales of betrayal and satisfying revenge, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a story. End of story.